Welcome to D. Smith Science. In this video, I'm going to show you the basics on how to take a scenario, an experiment, and pull out the independent variable, the dependent variable, the constants, and the control, and to write a basic hypothesis. In this video, I'm going to encourage you to pause it, write things down, and be more engaged and actively into it. So let's start out with the definition of these. Independent variable, dependent variable, constants, and a control. A lot of textbooks like to say the independent variable is independent of the dependent variable. That's why it's called the independent variable. The dependent variable depends on what you do to the independent variable. I find that very confusing. So I've come up with some definitions that are more user-friendly for students, I believe. So if you want to quiz yourself, you can pause the video right now and see if you know what these mean. The IV is what I change. It's what I manipulate. That's what I'm doing the experiment on. That's why I change what I manipulate. The DV is the data collected. Very simply put, whatever you're measuring in the experiment, that is your dependent variable. That is what you are measuring. So I like to remember the D and DV is dependent variable, but could also stand for the data you're collecting in the experiment. Just like in mathematics, if we have a constant, that number is not changing. But notice I have constants, we have two S's in it. So those two S's stand for things that must stay the same in the experiment. All right, so things that stay the same in the experiment are the constants. Now the last one, the control, this is the no smoking sign I put to the IV. So it's the group that does not get the independent variable. It's the baseline or the comparison group. Okay, so we're going to talk about this, but here's a general hypothesis format, right? This is for an introductory level class, right? If I increase or decrease, that could be add or subtract, right? If I add the independent variable, right, then the dependent variable will increase or decrease. So you have to be specific with that, right? So you want to be very specific in your hypothesis. So let's do an example real quick. Let's say I have 10 tomato plants here. So right now I have 10 tomato plants. I have 5 of them that are going to, I want to see if this plant food or this fertilizer will increase the mass of the tomatoes. So these are tomato plants, right? So I want these 5 here are going to get the plant food. So all of these are going to be given, I think I'm going to say 5 grams of plant food or whatever the instruction would say, okay? These 5 would not get the plant food. That's what I'm going to compare them to, all right? So at the end of this experiment, what I'm trying to measure in this, right, what I'm looking for is when those tomatoes become ripe, I'm going to mass them on a scale, and I want to get their mass in grams, okay? So again, I have 10 plants, 5 are going to get plant food, fertilizer, 5 are not. Then I'm going to mass when they turn that red cut, when they turn nice red and ripe, I'm going to mass those tomatoes and see what the weight is, okay? So what I want you to try to do now is pause the video, see if you can pull up the independent variable, the dependent variable, the constants, and the control. What I changed, what my independent variable was in that first experiment, that was the addition of plant food. That's what I added. I'm adding plant food to those 5 plants. That's going to be your experimental group, some will say as well. So what I'm changing the independent variable is the plant food. So the 5 plants that get this fertilizer or plant food, that's my independent variable. My dependent variable is going to be the mass of those tomatoes. Right? So that's the data I'm collecting. So I'm actually going to be measuring this in grams. I'm going to take all of these tomato plants that didn't get it, and I'm going to weigh them once they're ripe, and I'm going to get a number. And then I'm going to weigh or mass all of those that did get the plant fertilizer, 5 plants, and I'm going to mass those at the very end as well. So that's the data I'm collecting on that. So I'm skipping the constants. I'm going to do the control next. So since I know the independent variable, is the plant food, right? This is the independent variable, these 5 right here. The control group are the 5 of plants that do not, right, referring to this, that do not get the independent variable. So it's the 5 plants that didn't get the plant food. That is my control group or my control in this experiment. Now, constants, there's a ton of these, okay? So constants are things that stay the same, right? So same amount of sunlight, the volume of water given each day, the type of soil, when to harvest, oops, that should be singular, when to harvest the tomato. All conditions theoretically should be the same except for the plant food or the fertilizer. So we have all of these done now, right? So now what I want to see what you can do, if you can pause the video and come up with your own hypothesis, your specific hypothesis here. So pause the video, and I encourage you to try to use the if IV then DV. Make sure it's specific and directional. Here's what I put. You probably may have something better. So if 5 grams of plant food, the fertilizer, are added to each tomato plant, then the total mass in grams of the ripe tomatoes will be larger than the tomato plants without plant food. So let's just check how I color coded this on this one here. So notice my IV is that teal color. Well, that's the IV inserted right there. I put a number in here just to make it even more specific, right? If you just would have said if I added, that's fine too. But notice I have added, right? I put that on there. So that's going to take care of like my directional here. And so then also the mass of the tomato plants, and I said the ripe tomato plants, which is more specific. So the mass in grams. I didn't just say mass. I said what I'm massing it in, right? Pounds, kilograms, grams, whatever. And I said ripe tomatoes. Also notice that it said larger. So that'll satisfy this right here. So this is the general hypothesis, right? So then what a lot of, as you move on in your science career, a lot of teachers have if, then, because. If IV, then DV, because. And the because afterward would come from scientific research you've done that would help you formulate your idea. It's based on previous research what other people have done. So hopefully that helps you write a specific directional hypothesis. Thank you for watching, and subscribe if you like.
Go, hit it.
Oh no, are you serious?
No way.
Are you serious?